This is the Art Beauty Podcast where we are always reaching for truth in beauty. Hi, everyone. I'm Amber, and today my fabulous and brilliant co-host is Madhavi Gavini. She is the co-founder and CEO of Droplette, a device we are going to be talking all about. First of all, welcome to the show, Madhavi.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
I'm really excited. And, before we get into this device, I want to say to all the listeners at home, I feel like this episode really epitomizes why I created this podcast. So to remind everybody, we created this podcast because we believe you deserve to be informed so that you can make the best decisions for yourself. Now, the brands on our show do not pay to be here, which gives us the chance to have honest and candid conversations with the brilliant creators of products like Droplette. And so I'm really excited today because, when I looked into the Droplette device, there are mixed reviews, but one thing I was really impressed with was the science behind it. So we are going to be talking about not only the science, but we're going to be addressing some of those sort of mixed reviews. I've tried this myself, and I had some things that gave me a little pause for thought that I know that we're going to address today too. So anyway, thank you for being here. I'm super psyched about this episode.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. And this will be fun.
I think it will be a great time and super informative. So I've got to say, Madhavi, you have a very impressive background. And when I started to look into this, there is some really impressive science here, including the fact that this was funded partially by NASA. So, before we talk about the device, can you tell us a little bit about your history?
Sure. So my background is actually in drug design and drug development. So I don't come from sort of the more traditional beauty world. And my co-founder actually is a chemical engineer by training. So when we first were building Droplette and the core technology behind it, we really built it initially as a medical device because the problem we were trying to solve, right, is one that's in both medicine as well as in beauty. It's really the inability of large molecules to effectively penetrate skin. So on the therapeutic side, right, it's a huge issue for drug delivery, but then equally so for cosmetics because you have all these fabulous ingredients like collagen and hyaluronic acid, and you want them to be in your skin, and they don't actually absorb when they're applied topically.
I mean, the reality. So, when I worked with Murad for a long time, and I was fascinated to learn that the collagen molecule is just actually physically too big to penetrate the skin layers where you really want it to affect difference and change. Now, brands are coming up with micronized versions of this, but certainly we are starting to see a lot more of beauty tech that is coming from incredible founders or like yourself who have their origins in medical delivery systems, drug delivery systems, because there is a combination there. So what was the inspiration behind Droplette?
So the inspiration behind it was actually we wanted to treat a rare skin disease called epidermolysis bullosa. It's called butterfly skin syndrome more colloquially. And patients who have it are missing basically a gene that codes for a connective protein between skin and muscle. And when that gene is missing and that protein's not being made, patient's skin falls off or sloughs off. It's incredibly painful. It's got a very high mortality rate in the dystrophic versions. And so the thing that was striking to me, because my background was in drug design and drug development, I designed drugs for pediatric heart disease before that. So I'd worked in, pediatric diseases and very much on the therapeutics development side, was for this particular disease, we know exactly how to treat it. You just have to get that gene back into that skin cell. And we can mass produce genes. We have the capacity to do that. And the reason we cannot treat those patients is because we have no delivery mechanism. We have no way of getting the gene to the target site. And solving that problem was really what inspired me and my co-founder to start Droplette. It began as very much a passion project. We built, classic founder story, built the first versions of it on our kitchen table at home. We're very fortunate to be able to get early funding to sort of prove out that point. And then from there, kind of developed into the company we are today. And we do a lot of medical research as well in the background at Droplette.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what, can you give us a little refresher on when we're talking about delivering into the skin? Can you give us a little refresher about, what that entails, what we're talking about, where it needs to go?
Yeah, so as I'm sure you recall from your time at Murad as well, your skin has a barrier called the stratum corneum, and it's basically made up of dead cells, and its primary job is to protect your skin and prevent things from going in. And my co-founder likes to use this anecdote about how it's the reason why when we shower, we don't turn into a puddle of goo. Um, because right or swimmer or so on. And so basically it's evolved as a barrier function, and anything that's over 500 daltons, and a dalton is just a unit of molecular weight, it's just a size unit, cannot penetrate skin effectively. There's like one or two exceptions to that. I think heparin is one, but that's a general rule. And for things like collagen or hyaluronic acid or gene products, we're talking about molecules that are in the tens to 100,000 to millions of Daltons. And there's just no way for them to get past the stratum corneum when they're applied topically.
Right.
So for many cases, you have to inject them, but that doesn't really work for daily administration at home. We're not willing to inject our faces thousands of times and so on. So once a molecule gets past the stratum corneum, like if you're able to get past that barrier, it's going to diffuse into the epidermis, and then which is the upper layer of skin, and then the dermis, which is slightly below that. And you're just going to get general distribution into skin. So the real key there is getting the molecule past that initial barrier.
Now, would you say that for topical skincare, that no brand has been able to really deliver that? So all of these serums we're buying, the hyaluronic acid, the vitamin C's, is it really all for nothing?
I think that there is a benefit to topical administration for some of these molecules. I think, topical hyaluronic acid, for example, is the humectant. So
Right.
it grabs moisture, it helps prevent transepidermal water loss. But the real benefit of it that you see is really when it goes into skin. And when it's applied topically, you are missing out on that particular benefit.
Got it. Okay. Which is why I guess like a lot of doctors like to do injections of certain things. And listen, I've always said, I think a lot of the things with skincare is that you have to have realistic expectations. You're not going to get in a bottle what you're going to get in a needle, what you're going to get in a laser, what you're going to get from a knife, right? So we have to manage those expectations. So what is the technology behind Droplet, and
So
how does it allow to get into the past the stratum corneum?
Yeah, so Droplet uses basically it uses it's electromechanical. So we have a piezoelectric transducer. It's the main element in the device, and what it does is it takes fluids and it cavitates them into an aerosol. And this technology has been around for a long time. It's not new to us. And it's used in many medical devices like nebulizers, for example. We do a lot of customization to our piezos. They're custom made to us. There's a lot of firmware, and the settings are optimized. But really the secret sauce, or like the thing that makes our technology different, is we have a proprietary pump system that captures the aerosol that we generate, and then it adds velocity to it. It further accelerates it. So you end up with very small droplets that are moving at very high velocity. And the combination of that tiny droplet size as well as the speed at which it's moving allows it to push past the stratum corneum. And the idea of small molecules moving at high velocity doing that is, once again, not completely new to Droplet. There's needle-free jet injection technology, which has been around since the 1970s.
Okay.
And there's a few companies that are building on that. And basically, they use a high-speed jet to incise the skin and deliver vaccines, for example, or other biological drugs into the bloodstream without using needles. And it's a really great technology. And in our case, instead of a high-speed jet, it's a high-speed spray. So each droplet is monodispersed. It doesn't coalesce. It remains individual, but it's moving once again very quickly. And that's what allows the better penetration profile.
Okay, so now it's interesting because once we talk about penetration, what I do know about the FDA, right, is that, and the reason that a lot of beauty isn't regulated is because it's not entering the bloodstream. However,
That's
we
right.
kind of know now that a lot of products do, even topical products do. When we're talking about things that are micronized, that are getting past that initial skin barrier, is there sort of that gray area where this is becoming a drug? I know I read somewhere that you're actually applying for sort of a medical designation. Is that true?
We are for some of our medical applications or medical
Okay.
indications, and that's exactly right. So it would be for so we're doing R&D right now, and we're exploring that for areas such as antibiotic delivery,
Mm.
potentially for diabetic foot ulcers. We're looking into it for delivery of like potential growth factors, not the growth factor serum we sell on site, but like individual lyophilized growth factors for wound care and for expediting healing for both like diabetic wounds where you have microcirculatory disorders, but then also for burn patients.
Okay, so let's talk about, you come up with this super high-tech device, that has proven applications in medicine. You realize that it will probably have these incredible applications for beauty and cosmetic use. Where did you go from there? How did you start testing this? What was the next step?
So a lot of our early testing was exactly what you'd expect from a biotechnology company, where we were doing delivery of a variety of therapeutics or just large compounds into skin explants. And you can get that, dermatologists get that from excess skin left over from surgeries, for example. And that's like a very good way of sort of testing the technology and demonstrating that we can actually get a good delivery profile. On the consumer side, we did IRB approved consumer studies. So these are done by third parties. They're overseen by a dermatologist, and you get basically around 40 to 50 participants, and you
Okay.
have them test your device and a cosmetic formulation through it. So, for example, collagen or tranexamic acid, and then you figure out what the endpoints you're looking for, what they would be. So, for something like collagen and retinol, you'd be looking at skin elasticity and um, pigmentation potentially. You'd be looking at wrinkle depth and wrinkle profile, and those are kind of the endpoints. So during the study, you do a variety of quantitative measures. So you use machines that measure, right, transepidermal water loss, skin hydration. There's a thing called an elastometer that tells you how elastic your skin is, right? How stretchy it is. And then you do profilometry, which looks at wrinkle depth. So how many wrinkles do you have and how deep are they? And you track that progression over time. And this is something that you don't see in a lot of cosmetics companies. You tend to get a lot more subjective testing, like does your skin feel hydrated versus actually measuring it using state-of-the-art instrumentation. And I think that's probably where a little bit of our biotech backgrounds come into play, where if we can't quantify it, we don't believe it. And so we made sure that we had all of those quantitative analyses in all of our studies.
No, I love this because you were actually last week, our episode was all about clinical testing with a laboratory that does this. And they explained everything between consumer perception studies, which are, does your skin appear better? Does it feel better?
Right.
Versus these sort of more technical studies. And so what were some of the findings that you found after doing these, more medically based technical studies?
So we did it with a variety of formulations, and we found a couple of really interesting things. The first is that when we deliver the same serum through Droplette, we see substantially better outcomes. So if
Okay.
you apply it topically, you're just not getting anywhere near the same result. So that was really exciting because it proves out that, and it feels common sense, like if, A equals B, then B equals C, then A should equal C. But like it's really nice to see that actually prove out to be the case in a test, in a large scale test with users. The second was that when you deliver ingredients through Droplette, you see results a lot faster. So typically, if you look at longitudinal skin studies where you're looking at quantitative outputs, you're looking at 16 to 24-week trials. And
Okay.
that's where you start to see, it's a few skin cycles, and that's where you
Yeah.
start to see improvements. And we're seeing really quick ones in just 4 weeks. And to us, that was indicative of getting a higher concentration of perhaps that active ingredient in the skin, and hence like you're getting faster results. Um, and I think the third really interesting point to it is that when you deliver ingredients through Droplette, you end up with ultra hydration in the skin, which is totally independent of the ingredient itself. So all of our formulations have water in them, they're water based. And we knew back from when we were exploring medical applications that basically hydrating your skin barrier is such an important part of strengthening it and
Right.
keeping it healthy. And that's a really nice secondary benefit of the technology.
Okay, so we have dove into this, and now I have the device here. When you were doing these tests, were these with this sort of current device, as well as these pods here?
That's right. That's exactly
Okay.
right.
So it wasn't sort of like this technology and some super high fancy equipment. It was actually using the at-home devices.
That's exactly right. And then as we make changes to our device, as we improve it over time, we rerun all of our functional assays. So we make sure that, any change that we do won't inadvertently diminish or change the efficacy of the hardware.
Now, when it comes to your studies, are these published anywhere? Are these on your website? Is there a place people can go and see them?
Yeah, all of the results of our IRB studies are on our website, and then we do have a handful of peer-reviewed publications in academic journals, as well as a couple of textbook chapters, which are a little bit dense, but people are welcome to go through them. And I love when they ask questions. We get some really great ones on our Instagram, for example.
That, and I think that's really important, right? Because these days, the consumer, we have so much more access to information. Some of it, and the reason that I do this, sometimes it's hard to decipher all of that information. But I like knowing that it's out there, that we can, people can look for certain things, because at the end of the day too, everybody's situation is different, everybody's skin type is different. So things that I might be looking for or needing, or concerns I might have, are going to be different than the concerns you're having, is going to be different than the concerns every single one of our listeners is having. So is there anything else that you feel like, in terms of this, because you now have a number of different formulas, you've got this device, and we're going to be talking in depth about that, that you feel like are next steps that are coming up for you?
So on the general technology side, we're working hard on continuously improving the technology. We should have an announcement about our Gen 2 device in a few weeks, which will be really exciting. And then we also invest really heavily on the capsule side. So there's the obvious work that goes into designing a formulation, which my co-founder obviously does a ton of, being a chemical engineer. And then we also have invested really heavily in automation because, as you know, one of the big pain points in beauty is ingredient degradation.
Right.
So you take something like vitamin C and you have a bottle after, 2 or 3 weeks of using it, you might not have any active ingredient left because it degrades so quickly. So we invested very heavily in building basically robots that are able to take our capsules and fill and seal them with formulation at a rate that's hundreds of times faster than a human would be able to. And that's a way of diminishing the amount of time that the ingredient spends exposed to oxygen or air and keeping it really closely sealed. So that's been a very cool project we've been doing behind the scenes as well over the last year.
I've touched. Where are you based?
We're in Boston.
You're in, I mean, listen, I might have to take a trip up there, because I am just so fascinated. I love when we can talk nerdy on this podcast, because I think it's clearly fascinating. Like, where are these robots? Do you have this giant lab? Is there a warehouse? Is it in your basement?
I wish. We rent a building that's actually owned by the city of Boston. It's in the Seaport, and we built. Our engineering team worked really hard to build these, along with some consultants and contractors. And we have two of these robots there, and they're basically able to produce millions of capsules a month, and
Wow.
in just like record time. And yes, would love to have you come see our robots.
I mean, I would love to see that. It's funny. I've never actually toured any of these sort of beauty production facilities. It's something that I really, I'm thinking right now that I need to do. So how many people right now are working on your team with Droplette?
So we have about 50 or so employees at
Okay.
Droplette.
Wow.
Yeah, and that includes, so we're quite vertically integrated. A big part of that includes hiring people locally to help run these machines. We do a lot of our own like shipping in-house, which lets us customize orders and gives us a little bit more flexibility as well. And then that includes, of course, our customer care and esthetician teams. And that's been a really cool program we launched just a few months ago as well, where if you're a customer or even a prospective Droplet customer, there's a phone line that's on our website, and you can text one of our licensed estheticians questions about your skincare routine. It can be about Droplet, it could be about skincare in general, and they will text you back. It's totally free. And
Nice.
it's really just kind of a service to both kind of help you with your product if you're a Droplet user, but if you're just not sure about it or if you have questions, it's a really good and easy way to get something individualized to your skincare type.
I love that. And so let's dive into a little bit of about the device. As I mentioned at the beginning, when I looked into this product, I found mixed reviews. Now,
Right.
I want to say before we get into anything, I mentioned at the beginning, I think especially when it comes to at-home devices, when I look at reviews, I really have learned to read into them, because I think that a lot of people, when it comes to anything at home, sometimes I wonder about their expectations, right? And I think with any beauty at home device, you're not going to get the same results as you are from something in office. Like I said, a bottle is not going to do the same as a needle, is not going to do the same as a knife. It's just the way that it is. But that said, there were some things that I noticed, and that I want to get into. Um, and then also, for full disclosure, I was sent this device to try. And I will talk about my experience. And I have some questions, because there were some things that I was like, I want to ask about this before I delve into this a lot further. So let's talk about the
Sure.
actual design of the device. So this is the Droplette device. You plug it in, right?
Yep.
And no, so is this the Gen 1?
This is our Gen 1.
Okay, Gen 1 device. So you can see here, you put a capsule in, and I actually did one right before this show, because I will say, I did notice with this, boy, did it make my skin glow. And this is the collagen capsule. And so tell us a little bit about why you designed this as such.
So we worked with a really great industrial designer who had actually done some work at Keurig, which
Okay.
is probably not a shock when you actually look at the design for the device.
Yeah.
So so we basically we wanted it to be a pod system where you could
Yeah.
take any of our capsules, put them in really easily, and create like a fairly simple experience for the user where it was a one button click. And then all of the ability to customize the device to your skin type or your treatment modalities exists on our paired app. So that's on iPhone or Android. And the device is intended to be as simple as possible to use, and you can use it out of the box, as you know. But then if you want to do anything more advanced or custom, it would be through the app, and it would pair to the device, and you can put it into specific targeted modes.
Okay, so I did not even know that there was a pairing to the device. So maybe I'm missing out on here, because I'm a person, and I'm bad, Amber. I open it right up, I pop something in, and I'm like, let's go, basically not even reading the directions. So in my first capsule, so I started with the lips. I have two things here. I've got the lip plumper and the hydrofiller, but I know, how many formulations do you have?
So we have 6 formulations right now.
Okay. So I can only talk about the two that I've talked about, but we can talk about the other ones. You'll see here, and one of the things that I do know that you do is that with these capsules, you offer a recycling program.
We
So
do.
you can see here, I started to pop the used ones in here, because then you can send them back. Now, the first one, I have to be honest, I popped it in, nothing happened. Now, I read that I was supposed to shake, because after I was like, wait, huh? I mean, I felt the air going, nothing came out. Then I went back around the directions, and I was like, oh, I was supposed to shake it a little bit. So I put it in. The second one worked. I want to just start with the first thing that I noticed with this device. When it comes to having a microfine mist, it hit me like, is this safe to be inhaling? That really kind of, I was like, whoa. And that's why I didn't make it through the whole month of trials, because I was like, I want to hear, have they done any studies about this, and is it safe to be breathing this in?
We did. We've done a lot
Okay.
of studies about it. So back in 2020, before we had launched on the market, during the COVID epidemic, because we were a medical device and we were government funded, we sort of exist in a database of government funded technologies in that sector. And one of the calls that came out was actually to see whether our technology could be adapted to deliver drugs into the lungs. This was a huge problem, as you recall, at the time.
Right.
And we went ahead and we did those tests, and we discovered that because of the particle size we're generating, it does not get into the lungs. And that's a standardized test that we do, which is called cascade impaction studies. It's
Okay.
basically the gold standard. It's done with a third-party lab, and really what they look at is if you take the device and you huff it, like you're actively inhaling, can you get particle deposition in the lower airways? and you cannot. And the reason for that is really comes down to the size of the molecule we create, or the size of the particle we create. It either evaporates before it gets that far in, or it's going to hit your mucosa. It's not actually going to get into your lungs at all.
Okay, I mean, listen, I'm going to be honest. Like, I've inhaled worse, and we'll just leave it at that. But I was
Yeah.
like, now in my older age, I'm like, maybe this, isn't so good. And I've seen people, again, I only tried the collagen, which has a very lovely rose scent, and the lip filler. But there's no way around not breathing this in. I've seen people with the retinol online who were coughing a little bit.
I think it's likely the glycolic actually,
Oh, the
where we
glycolic. Okay.
yeah, where we see that. And that is a formulation that has an AHA in there. It's not fun to inhale, and it has a little bit of a cult following. So for people who have acne, like if you have a big cystic pimple and you put the device on its blemish treatment mode and you use it, people see resolution of that really, really quickly. And the best way to do it is if you hold the device immediately against it. You're not really creating that absorption, and you do sort of like spot treatments, right? But if you're trying to use glycolic and you're going over your whole face, and you do like open your mouth and get a little bit of it in, yeah, it absolutely will not be a fun experience. And that doesn't surprise me that that's the case.
So, because now listen, I really must have screwed this up because I was not aware of the app. So maybe I wasn't doing the right programming. But what I understood was that it's about a minute long cycle with this spray mechanism. So, I mean, it's really hard to hold your breath for a minute.
No, it's start stop on the device actually. So
Oh,
it press to turn on, press to turn off
right.
on
Yeah.
hardware.
Oh, mine. So, okay. So I pressed it to turn on, but I felt like it ran for about a minute and then
It'll
turned
keep
off.
it'll turn off automatically after a period of time, after about a minute, which is typically when capsules are emptied. But I think that's a good learning for us to be a lot more prescriptive about some of these formulations. So for glycolic, we probably like we're redoing our packaging. So
Okay.
including that start stop sort of and use it primarily for spot treatment, run it for 5 seconds so you're not having to hold your breath, right? I think
So
that would probably make a big
okay,
difference.
yes. And listen, this is why I love to do this podcast. And this was, I think, I really want to celebrate you for coming on as a brand, because I told you ahead of time, hey, I've got some things that made me pause a little bit. But I think that it's really admirable that you're coming on and addressing those heads on. So with these treatments, you actually recommend a start stop method. And had I downloaded the app, would that have been a little bit more clear?
I think to an extent, I think for lips especially though, so the product is called 17-volt lip filler or lip plumper, and it's because the pump on the device is typically running at a default voltage, and we actually
Okay.
ramp it all the way up to 17 volts. And we do that through the app. There's a lip plumping mode. So if you use it on your lips, I would be genuinely shocked in its default mode if you saw any improvement, maybe a little softening. Right, exactly.
Okay. And now I was going to be honest with you. I was like, because so I bite my lips, I lick my lips. My lips, I always kid around with my husband. I'm like, it's like kissing fine grit sandpaper. So when I got this, I was like, yes, I'm so pumped about this. But I was going to tell you, I put it on the first one, nothing came out.
Of course,
And
yeah.
then the second, third, and fourth, and I did it twice, and I was like, I'm not really noticing anything, but hey, there we go. I guess I'll have to go back and try it the correct way.
Yeah, I'd love to hear how that works out.
So good to know. So listen, hey, listen, I wish I would have known, I read the little instruction card, but I don't think that I knew enough to um download the app. Got it. So this is really meant to be paired with the app for the best use. Okay. So in terms of safety, we covered that. Another thing people were mentioning and that I kind of noticed myself too was a little bit of like the pod leakage. Right.
Right.
So you use this a little bit. And actually you can see because I used it before. I don't know if you can see here, but you see like a little
Yeah,
bit of
yeah.
this drip here. What are thoughts on that in terms of is that something
Yeah,
you're
I think
addressing in the new device?
it is. Like that particular factor, that dribble, is something we're very much impacting and hope to solve with this new device. But with the current one, it's gravity fed, and both devices are like that isn't changing. So when you hold it, and you hold it as sort of horizontally, like you have to kind of, lean all the way back. That's the best way to minimize that particular experience
Right.
with the dribbling. And it's also the reason why, as a company, we made the decision to quote overfill our capsules a little bit as well, because we know that there's going to be some loss from that. And we want you to get the appropriate amount of the ingredient into your skin. And so we do account for both that dribbling impact as well as the spray off you're going to get into the air. Like not all of it is going to get,
Right.
into your skin. It will spray away. Some of it will just be on top. And so those are all calculations we made when we do create our formulations and fill it to that particular capacity. But I completely understand why somebody would not want to see anything kind of leaking or dribbling out of it. And that's exactly why we spent about a year fixing it in our next gen device.
Okay. So I think a lot of this can bring me to my third point. And number one, I feel like thank you for explaining how to use it, because again, I took this out, I put a capsule in and I kind of was like this, but I noticed I'm like, oh, it would kind of start to puff off. But if I tilt it a little bit, so maybe this is something to be good used laying down. I don't know. Maybe you want to think about like a nose plug, I don't know if that's too weird. I know when I go get spray tanned, they give you nose plugs.
Yeah, we could do a Droplette branded nose plug that comes in.
I mean, it's not the prettiest thing, but I listen, these days it's kind of like we all want to be really careful about what it is that we're inhaling. All right. And then the third caveat that I really felt that this kind of got, where I saw the negative reviews, and listen, there were a lot of positive reviews out there too, was the price, right? Clearly this is a high-tech device. Somewhere in there, you have to pay for the science behind it. But is there any thoughts on price, right? Because I think the device itself was $299.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a really good point. And consumers are careful about where they spend their dollars, and rightly so. I mean, I'm the same way as a customer. So when we were first building Droplette, it cost us over $200 to make the device.
Yeah.
And that has to do with you're doing small batch production when you first launch a product, and you are, there's several steps that are incredibly labor intensive. Every single device is tested before it comes off the line. So all of those sort of fail safes and,
Yeah.
and things just increase the production cost for the company. And consequently, you have to price it based on that.
Yeah.
So that was where we had come around to that price initially. As we work through scaling the device and making certain aspects more automated, I talked about how we invest really heavily in that side of it. We are able to take price out of the production. And that's something that's reflective in our current pricing.
Sure.
So over time, we've been doing things where we've sort of slowly or stealthily tried to make the device more accessible by offering, sales over the holidays. And now we're doing it, the device it's our Gen 1. We're selling it for $99.
Right.
And that's a way to significantly increase people's accessibility to the hardware. And then as we go into Gen 2, once again, we do have some new, like it's a slightly stronger device. There has been some new tooling and some new engineering around it. So typically the price is reflective of the labor and the componentry that goes into making it.
Sure. And I think, listen, at the end of the day, I think that when it comes to a lot of the devices that we see on the market, there's a market for that, right? They're not going to be these at-home high-tech devices are not going to be accessible to everybody. I think it's, but I do think that this in some ways is an affordable luxury, right? It's something that we want. I know Brooke Shields shows that she loves it. And then, I will give you credit that it looks like when people were complaining about this, your customer service would replace the devices. That's a lot of what I read.
That's
So
right. So yeah, if there's an issue with your hardware, we have a 2-year warranty. So we do replacements. If you've used capsules in that process, we of course will replace those and usually send you some bonuses. And so that's kind of our way of handling that problem.
Okay. And now, this can only be used with the capsules from Droplette.
That's right.
Is there any thoughts to make this, something that you can use with your regular skincare? I guess that would be really hard, right? To get that sort of particle size.
I think the challenge around that is you want to make sure that it's a really clean ingredient deck. So our
Mm,
ingredients have a really minimal preservative system. There's no phthalates, there's no PFAS, there's like a lot of no microplastics and so on, right? So we're really careful to keep anything out of your skin that could be harmful to it. But I think that there is absolutely a world where we can do other skincare brands through Droplette,
right.
and we could make a capsule for, name the brand. And there's so many skincare brands out there with absolutely incredible ingredients that they own or formulations that they own. And I think that's something that we would be very excited about working with.
So I again I feel like, oh, and so what are the capsules? They range in price from about what to what?
Yeah, so they range in price from about 30 to about $110 for our
Okay.
standard line. And then we have one really premium line of capsules, which is growth factors. And if I can nerd out for just a minute there,
Yeah,
we
let's do it. Let's get
okay.
get nerdy with me.
So we work with this really cool biotechnology company in Texas, and they basically grow stem cells and they collect the exudate from it. It's called mesenchymal stem cell conditioned media. And this is an ingredient that we know a lot about in medicine because they use that for a variety of regenerative medicine technologies. So it's used in clinical trials from everything from Alzheimer's disease to stroke and ischemia reperfusion injuries to spinal cord crush sort of injuries as well. And it's really great at getting your latent stem cells to mobilize. And the things that are, we all have stem cells in our body. It's one of the big paradoxes of aging that we die while having millions of stem cells that could regenerate all of our organs, but they're just dormant. They aren't active. And this stem cell conditioned media has basically signal proteins or growth factors in there that are able to activate those dormant stem cells and get them to act as though they were younger. And it's actually a very, very cool thing in the medical side. The thing with it, though, is they're not very stable. So they're not shelf stable, and they will degrade quite quickly. So we worked with this company. We get this conditioned media, frozen and shipped to us. We add a few other things through it with one of our contractors, also, all done in the cold, basically on ice or frozen. So we add like amino acids to it and a few other peptides and proteins. And then we actually ship it to the consumer on ice. So
Wow.
it's shipped cold. We ask you to store it in your freezer. If you're gonna use it, and then you just take the capsules out, and they're small volumes. It's about a mil of liquid, so they thaw pretty quickly, and then you just use it that way. And it's a really cool product. We've seen some incredible before and afters, especially from our older users, and it is an expensive product because of the cold storage and because of the
Sure.
quality of the ingredient, of course.
What is that priced at?
So that's 380
O-
for a monthly supply of that.
Okay. Yeah, listen, you know what? These days it's like I think that there is beauty at all levels, right? But we look at a lot of moisturizers and cream that offer um none of that true science that are priced way higher than that. So I think that again, this is why I do this podcast. It's informative so people can make the best decisions for themselves. I mean, I'm all for it. I've seen incredible things with growth factors, and certainly as I'm getting older, that's when you really want to start to invest in your skincare. So what's next for you? You've got this Gen 2 coming out. Certainly are you is there anything else that you're working on?
We're working on a few things actually that we're pretty excited about. We're working on creating more instant efficacy products. So
Okay.
basically products where you can see results quickly. So with skincare,
Yeah.
it takes a while.
Yeah.
And I think that people sometimes have acute conditions. I think acne or blemishes are a really good example of that, where you don't want to wait 30 days for your acne to clear up.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to develop basically both modes on the app by changing the delivery voltage on the device to allow more efficacious delivery, as well as creating like regimens with our existing formulations to allow for faster treatment
Right.
of that. So hopefully, I mean, our goal is you will see results. You spray yourself at night and you wake up in the morning and you'll see that basically be gone.
Right.
Um, and if we can pull that off, that would be incredibly exciting. And that's something that's in testing right now.
I mean,
Um,
God, yes. I hope that you pull that off. And if you do, you call me right up because we're going to do another show right on that.
Yeah. And it's such a big pain point, and you get it. I mean, people get acne at all ages. There's a teenage acne, which is obviously horrible when you're a teenager. I actually somehow did not get it as a teenager, but then I got it in my late 20s, which was upsetting. I
Probably
thought I had
even like
dodged it.
worse in some ways.
Oh, so much
Yeah.
worse. Yeah. Right when I was starting Droplette too. So I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to build a skincare company, but it's not entirely because of what's happening on my own face.
Well, we talk a lot of founders who look at their own skin conditions and are like, wow, we need to figure out there's got to be a better way.
Right.
Yeah, I'm going to just hop in there. I think with everybody, I'm always wary of things that promise instant results. There are products that can give you instantaneous results, but they're not going to necessarily give you the long-term benefit.
Yeah, they're
I feel
masking
like
it,
it's a
right?
it or maybe they can't. I'm just going to say I'm always cautious of things that promise like instant results. I will say this. How long, or I want to ask you, how long did these capsules last? So is there an expiration date on them, or is it something that you could, buy 30 of these and use them over like a couple months or?
So they last, our capsules last for about 2 years in terms of the
Okay.
formula integrity. Growth factors is the one example because of the cold storage logistics, and I think it's about 6 months there. We
Right.
would strongly recommend use. Realistically, we know from the vendor the ingredient probably lasts longer, but that was kind of the extent of our testing,
Sure.
so we feel good giving it that stamp of approval. We do see with our user base that there is a little bit of what we call like a virtuous cycle, right? Which is the people who use it on a more regular schedule tend to see more of those results. And I think in many ways it's because it's designed a little bit like a vitamin. And I think you take vitamins every single day and you have to do it long term. And it's a bit of a slog, but that's what's necessary to see the results with that. And I think it's a similar approach here, which is if you use it consistently, and that's true for any skincare product, right? You're gonna see those results far more effectively that way.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And so thank you with that. And that's why I'm always like with the instant results, no, it takes a while. And as you mentioned before, it takes a few skin cycles to really get those, glowing results. But I will say, and I have to give you this credit because now I feel a lot better using it. Also now knowing how to use it, so that I'm not breathing it in. But after one use, um, I felt like my skin was glowing. Today I was like, I'm not sure about, listen, I was kept it real with you. I was like, I don't know. Am I breathing this in? But right before the show, I was like, I'm going to do it because boy, it left my skin with a beautiful glow. It really did. So
Those
I'm
look
thinking,
incredible.
if it's not something that's affordable to you for maybe everyday use, or maybe you have a skin routine that you like, boy, before an event, this seems like it would be a really nice. My makeup went on great. I mean, I feel like I'm glowing today. I don't know. Maybe that's just a little, maybe it's a placebo effect, but I'm telling you, and
Your
I
skin looks
watched
incredible.
what, but a lot of that, what I saw of people who had tried it for the first time, and they're like, I don't know. Okay, no, your wrinkles didn't go away. The acne maybe didn't go, but boy, everybody's skin had a really nice little glow to it. So that's all I got to say about that. So maybe it's something that you use for a special occasion. Madhavi, I want to thank you Madhavi, sorry. I want to thank you so much for being on this show. It's clear that that you're so smart, that you have put so much thought and care into this. And I really appreciate you coming on and being honest with us about, some of the concerns that we've read about. So I want to thank you and I applaud you for doing that. If people want to know more about Droplette, where can they go?
They can find us on our website, which is Droplette, so DROPLETTE.io, or they can follow us on Instagram at Droplette Inc.
And for those of us who might have the device and not have downloaded this software, can we get that on the App Store?
It's on the App Store and on the Android store as well. So
Well,
yes, please download it. I think you'll get a much better experience out of your technology with that.
I will have to do a social media post, and I promise that I will now, because I've got to show this with the lips before and after. So I'll wait. Maybe I'll do that tomorrow morning so that I can have it go up with this episode. I want to thank you so much for being on. Of course, everybody listening at home, I hope this was informative. We want you to make the best decisions for yourself. If you have any questions that you want to ask me, because now that I've gotten the chance to try this, I'm happy to answer them. You can write me at hello@artbeautypodcast.com. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and of course on YouTube at Art Beauty Podcast. And as always, we will see you next Tuesday. Bye.